Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Sketch Class. And today is all about lines and shapes. Now, lines and shapes are so important because everything is based off of lines and shapes. Everything can be broken down into a simple shape. Everything could be broken down into a simple line. Therefore, the better that we draw lines and the better that we draw shapes, the better we will be able to draw anything. So, today's sketch class, lines and shapes. Here we go. For today's video, I have prepared this worksheet so that you can follow along with me. Now, this information is cool, but it's so much better when you practice with me. So go ahead and grab this paper. You can throw it on your iPad, you can print it, you can use color pencil, markers, crayons, anything you'd like, as long as you can follow along and we can do it together. Lines and shapes, sketch class, here we go. In this entire practice, we're going to be practicing pencil control. Now, when you're making your lines, when you're making your strokes, there's three major ways that you can do them. If you're doing everything within the wrist, those are your small strokes. Those are going to be your detailed strokes. You're going to want to use that for your fine lines and your little details. If you're making a medium stroke, something where you need to make a curve or a straight line, you're going to want to use your elbow. You're going to want to draw from your elbow. Keep your wrist completely straight and only bend at the elbow. This is going to give you much more stability for those medium strokes. And last but not least, so for large strokes, you're going to want to hold your elbow completely still. You're going to want to hold your wrist completely still. And you're going to want to only bend at the shoulder. By only bending at the shoulder, you're going to be able to make a large stroke. You'll be able to make really large circles. And you can work on those big objects with long, continuous strokes. Okay, so you have your worksheet in front of you. Let's start with lines. We're going to start with some vertical lines. Then we're going to go over to some horizontal lines. And then we're going to get real saucy with some diagonal lines. By the end of this paper, by the end of this first exercise, this is how your paper should look. We're looking for evenly spaced lines. We're looking for almost perfect lines. You want to take your time. Go slow. The spacing should be the same. The size should be the same. The thickness should be the same. We're looking for identical lines each and every single time. That's what this exercise is all about. Here, we're not going to move much of our wrist. We might move a little bit of our elbow and a little bit of our shoulder because these are straight lines and we want to have dynamic control. Okay, here we go. So grab your worksheets. I'm going to be working on my iPad, but you can work on anything. You can print out the papers, you can print out the papers, you can use crayon, color pencil, marker, pencil, pen, anything you want, inks. You can use anything you want. All I'm looking for is to complete the worksheet. But for ease, so that you can follow along, I'll be doing it on my iPad. So here we go. The first section is lines. I'm going to zoom in here. You can move as close to the paper as you need to. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to trace those first lines. Take your time. The idea is not to go fast. The idea here is to draw as precisely as you can. Okay, so there we drew our first 5 lines. So there we drew our first 6 lines. Now let's continue until we go all the way through the edge of our paper. So we're being mindful of the space. We're being mindful of the thickness of our lines, and we're being mindful of the straightness of our lines. And yes, I'm completely aware that when I say mindful, you guys are thinking very cutesy and very demure. Yes, give me them demure lines. There we go. We finished the first row. Now let's move on to the horizontal lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Make sure that the space between them is the same. Okay, let's continue. There we go. We did 6 lines. We did 6 groups of these 6 horizontal lines. Great job. Let's keep it moving. Now we're going to go on to diagonal lines. First thing we're going to do is trace the first 5. And now we're on our own to fill up the rest of the row. We're looking for spacing, we're looking for thickness, and we're looking for size when it comes to the consistency of each of these lines. Alright, we're more than halfway. That was fast. Let's keep going. Okay, we're about a third of the way there. I'm barely using my wrist. I'm actually only moving my shoulder. This is keeping my lines as straight and consistent as possible. Draw my last few lines, and we're done. Now that we finished up lines, next we want to work on our shading. Shading is so important because it makes things come to life. It makes a 2-dimensional object into a 3-dimensional object, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. But for right now, we're going to work on our shading. See how in this image, shading gives depth. Everything that's in the foreground is nice and dark and detailed. Meanwhile, the further back you go, the lighter and lighter it is. If it wasn't for shading, this landscape would have no dimension and you wouldn't be able to tell what's in front, what's behind, or what's anywhere in between. We're going to use that concept to shade our box. So we're going to start from left to right and go from dark all the way to light. So the last thing on this sheet is the shading. So we're going to use the first box to practice, and then the next box is completely on our own. So what we're going to do is color right over what's already there. The idea is to start very dark and then slowly let up on our pen. Slowly get lighter and lighter until we get into the lightest lines. I find it much easier to start from dark to light versus light to dark. I also find that the lighter I get, I tend to move my hand to the back of the pencil, where when I'm doing really dark lines, my hand is almost at the tip of the pencil. As I get lighter, my hand goes to the back of the pencil. This gives me much more control on how light my lines are. And now all the way at the end, I'm going to get super light until it vanishes. Pretty good. Now let's do one on our own. So the next box, I'm going to do the same thing. Start dark. It's okay if you come out of the box a little bit. Now as I go lighter, I'm going to move my hand back. I'm going to start holding the pencil from the back part and not from the tip of the pencil. Once I get to about a quarter, 3/4 of the way there, I'm gonna go back over and darken up the beginning and fill it in a little bit. We're gonna take our time and we're gonna make sure that we have a nice gradation from dark to light, because we're gonna use this in all of our drawings to have any bit of realism and depth. Okay, all right, not bad, not bad. Let's keep moving. Next up, we have shapes. Any complex drawing can be broken down into simple shapes. Now, we all know the shapes of circle, triangle, square, rectangle, but today we're going to be working on 3D shapes. Here are those shapes. Those shapes are cube, cone, sphere, which is a ball, rectangular prism, pyramid, and cylinder. All of these simple shapes can be put together to make bigger and more complex shapes. Any complex shape could be broken down into these figures. First up, we're going to draw the cube. So we're going to take this first cube, trace it, shade it, and then we're going to make our own cubes. So we're literally just going to trace right over the cube that's already there. There's nothing wrong with tracing. Tracing is very, very good practice. There we go. Now, let's choose where the sun or where the light source is coming from. Let's go ahead and say that the light source is coming from this way. So the light is hitting this side right here. So that means that's going to be our lightest side. And what that also means is that back here is going to be our darkest sides. So we're going to go from dark to light. I'm going to shade in this back part dark, while keeping the front pretty light. Okay, not bad at all. The top is probably going to be lighter than the sides, but it's still going to have that gradation. Okay, this works. Now we're going to make our own cubes. So the first cube, I'm going to start with a square. Then we're going to draw the sides. One diagonal line, two diagonal line, three diagonal lines, and now we can connect them. One, two. Again, don't worry if it's perfect or not. We're going to fill up this whole paper with them. We're going to start dark in the back and lighter in the front. Do the same thing for the top. We're working on pen control, pressure control. The back of our shape should be darker. The front of our shape should be lighter. Next up, we have the rectangular prism. A prism is very, very, very similar to a cube. The difference here is that a cube has all equal sides. A prism has one side longer than the other. So same thing, let's go ahead and trace one and draw one. There's the front. Those are the sides. And now let's connect it all. Okay. Now let's say the light source is coming from the right. So we're going to go darker on this side and then lighter as we get to the right. So practice that shading. This is going to make all of our drawings look that much more realistic. I'm going to go back, fill it in. And there we go. Now let's work on one more on our own. So let's do a little rectangle. There's a skinny rectangle. Then we're going to draw the sides a little longer. 1, 2, 3. And now we're going to connect them. So the light source is going to come in from the top left. So what does that mean? That means that we have a little bit of shading on the right, on the top. Not much, just a little bit. You have a little bit of shading down here, a little more shading down here. But the most shading that we're going to see is going to be on the back. And this one too, when you're done, you can come back and add way more rectangles and fill up this entire page. But we're going to keep it moving for the sake of this video. Now we have the pyramid. So we're going to trace the pyramid first. Now this pyramid is see-through, so we're actually going to just draw two sides. We're not going to draw the lines behind the walls, and you'll see why in a second. So let's say the light source is coming from the top. We're going to go dark at the bottoms and lighter as we get to the top. Dark at the bottom and lighter as we get to the top. Okay? Let's try one on our own. So we're going to draw a really big triangle, and as it comes closer to us, the bottom edge comes down. So there's one side, and here's the other side. Beautiful. So for this one, light is going to be hitting it on the left side. So we're going to add shadows to the right side. So for this one, we're going to try a crosshatch. So not only are we going to go left to right, but we're also going to go top to bottom. Here's how that's going to look. Start with our horizontal lines. And then move on to our vertical lines. Crosshatching helps us fill in a space differently than if we were just to go in one direction. Now on your own, fill in the rest of this worksheet with more pyramids. Next, we have the cone. I love the cone because I love drawing ice cream cones. So we're going to trace. We're not going to draw the back because it's not see-through. So the light's going to be from the top. Not only am I going to draw my lines from the bottom up, but I'm also going to be mindful to make my lines curved. Why? Because this cone is a curved object. It's not straight, it has curves. So when our lines come in here, they need to also curve. There we go, there's our first cone. Let's make another cone. This time, let's make it more like an ice cream cone. So we're going to draw the opening. There's the opening to our cone. Then we're going to draw the bottom of it. There's our ice cream cone. Now, if the light, again, is hitting from the top, then what we're going to see is some shadows inside of the cone. And then we're also going to see some shadows outside of the cone. So this is how that's going to look. We're going to go dark towards the middle and then lighter as we come up. Remember, this is a hollow cone. This is where we're going to put our ice cream. So you see it's dark in the middle and then it gets lighter as the light hits it on the way out. So there's the inside of the cone. Now for the outside of the cone, we're going to go from light to dark, bottom to top. So here we go. Remember, curved lines. We're going to start dark and then gradually go light. Good job. Keep going. There we go. When we're making dark lines, not only are we applying more pressure, we're also making our lines closer together. And there's our cone. Again, fill this entire sheet with more cones. Now we're moving on to the sphere. Our sphere looks just like a circle until we add our shading. So we're going to go ahead and trace the circle that's already here. Here we go. Trace the circle. Okay. It's just a circle, but now we're going to add dimension. So if the light source is coming from the top left, we're going to make the bottom right the darkest parts. And remember, it's curved, so here we go. I'm going to start with curved lines. On the bottom, it's going to be darker and lighter at the top. I like to go over it a couple times just to get my variations properly. Get the contrast right. There'll be some light shadows on that opposite side. Okay, there is our sphere. Now we're going to draw one more, but like I said, on each of these sheets, fill the whole paper up with that object. There's our circle, and this time the light source is going to hit directly from above. So the bottom is going to have our darkest lines. Then gradually we'll get lighter. Okay, did the first pass. Now let's make it darker. Remember, our darkest values are going to be at the bottom. Then we're gradually going to get lighter as we go up. Okay. There is our sphere. Now go ahead and fill the rest of this paper up with more spheres. And last but not least, we have the cylinder. So let's go ahead and trace this, add our shadows, and draw one more. So I'm going to start with the oval at the top. Then I'm going to draw the vertical lines. 1 and 2. Finally, we're going to connect these. Okay. And the light, let's make it come up from the top down. So the bottom is going to be the darkest. Here we go. And just like the cone, just like the sphere, we're working with round lines. So we're just going to start from the bottom, work our way up. I like to loosely mark my lines and then go back in and fill it in with more shadows. By layering it up, I can make sure to slowly add the contrast. Okay, there's our cylinder. We're going to draw one more. This time, we're going to draw it sideways. So we're going to draw an oval. We're going to draw an oval vertically. Then we're going to draw horizontal lines. And then we're going to connect them. This time the light's going to come from the left. So that means the right's going to be the darkest lines. Keeping in mind the curvature, we're going to go dark to light, right to left. Okay. The right's going to have our darkest lines. It gets lighter as we go to the left. Going over this a couple more times. Got a couple more lines in here. Alright. And I feel good about this. Now make sure to go back and fill in the entire paper with all of these shapes. Thank you all for joining me today. It was an amazing sketch class. We got to draw lines, we got to draw shapes, and now we have a better understanding of the foundational pieces that make any drawing. See you next time. Goodbye.